They lied to you about pain. Every single person who tried to explain it, every book that attempted to define it, every mentor who claimed to understand it, they missed the essential truth that changes everything. Pain isn't your enemy. It never was. But pain isn't automatically your ally either. This is where most men get it wrong. They endure suffering and expect transformation, then wonder why they remain unchanged. They carry their scars like medals, yet find themselves no stronger than before. They weather storms but gain no command over the seas. The missing piece lies in a truth so simple yet so profound that once you grasp it, you'll never view hardship the same way again. Pain only becomes strength when you claim ownership of it. Let that sink in for a moment. Feel the weight of those words. Ownership, not endurance, not survival, not tolerance. Ownership. The world is full of men who have suffered greatly yet gained nothing from it. Walk through any bar, any office, any neighborhood, and you'll find them easily enough. Bitter souls nursing ancient wounds, telling the same stories of how life did them wrong, how the system was rigged, how others betrayed them, how fate dealt them a cruel hand. These men experienced pain but never transformed it into power. The suffering passed through them like a ghost through a wall, leaving only a cold chill as evidence it was ever there. They remained victims because they never seized ownership of their pain. Compare them to history's giants, men who faced crushing defeats, devastating losses, and brutal challenges, yet emerged not just intact but magnificent. The difference wasn't the intensity of their suffering. It was what they did with it. Ownership begins with a savage rejection of victimhood. It demands you look your suffering dead in the eye and declare, "This belongs to me now." Not in resignation, but in conquest. You transform from the passive recipient of pain to its active master, from the hunted to the hunter. Think of the greatest physical transformations you've witnessed. The soft body forged into steel through punishing workouts. The untrained fighter molded into a champion through bruising sparring sessions. The rehabilitation patient rebuilding strength through agonizing therapy. In each case, pain was involved, but the pain alone did nothing. It was the deliberate claiming of that pain as a tool rather than an intruder that made all the difference. The same principle applies to every form of suffering. The loss of a relationship, the failure of a business, the betrayal of trust, the death of a dream. These pains can either be visitors that leave you diminished or resources that leave you enhanced. The outcome depends entirely on your relationship to them. Most people treat pain as something to escape. They numb it with distractions, drown it in vices, hide it behind forced smiles, run from it through endless busyness. But pain evaded is power abandoned. Every hurt you refuse to face becomes a chunk of your strength left unclaimed. Claiming ownership starts with a simple but uncomfortable question. What is this pain trying to teach me? Not asking, why is this happening to me? Which keeps you in victim mode. Not wondering, when will this end? Which makes you a passive sufferer. But what can I extract from this? Which positions you as the active harvester of value even from your worst moments. This shift changes everything. The failed relationship becomes a masterclass in understanding human nature. The business collapse becomes advanced education in resilience. The betrayal becomes specialized training in discernment. The lost dream becomes an unexpected doorway to an even greater vision. Ancient warriors understood this process intuitively. Spartan boys were deliberately subjected to discomfort because their elders knew that owned pain becomes martial prowess. Viking culture celebrated the man who could transform his wounds into wisdom. Samurai meditated on suffering as the forge of their unbreakable spirit. These weren't primitive practices, but sophisticated psychological systems built around a truth modern comfort has made us forget. Strength cannot be given, only claimed through deliberately owned adversity. The ownership process follows a pattern, regardless of what pain you're facing. First comes acknowledgement, feeling the full force of the hurt without minimizing or exaggerating it. Looking directly at the wound instead of away from it. This takes more courage than most realize and explains why many never begin the transformation. They can't bear to see their pain clearly, so they never truly own it. Next comes responsibility. Not for causing the pain necessarily, but for handling it. This means releasing the exhausting grip on blame. It means recognizing that regardless of who or what inflicted the hurt, what happens next is entirely yours to decide. Many men get stuck here, finding bitter comfort in pointing fingers rather than opening hands to receive the gift hidden within their suffering. Then comes the alchemical moment. The deliberate extraction of value from what appeared to be only injury. This is where you mine the pain for its hidden resources. The increased awareness, the deeper empathy, the sharper insight, the greater resolve, the clearer priorities, the stronger boundaries. These treasures lie buried within every painful experience, waiting for the man brave enough to dig for them. Finally comes integration. Weaving the strength you've extracted into the fabric of who you are. Not carrying the pain as a separate burden, but absorbing its lessons so completely that they become indistinguishable from your character. The pain itself may fade, but the power gained from it becomes permanent, accessible regardless of your emotional state or circumstances. This ownership process explains why two men can endure identical hardships, yet emerge with wildly different outcomes. One becomes diminished, carrying his pain like an anchor dragging behind him for years. The other becomes enhanced, wielding extracted wisdom and strength like weapons forged specifically for his hand. Same input, radically different output, based solely on their relationship to their suffering. Let's be brutally honest. Most men never complete this process. They remain fractional versions of themselves, haunted by unowned pain that follows them like a shadow. They tell themselves stories about moving on while still flinching at the memory of old hurts. They build walls instead of forging weapons. They become defensive rather than dangerous. The world doesn't need more men hiding from their pain or drowning in it. The world needs men who transform it. Men who stand amid the wreckage of what was and build something greater from its remains. Men who refuse to be defined by what hurt them and instead define themselves by what they harvested from the hurt. Think about the heroes you admire most, the ones whose stories genuinely move you. Look closely, and you'll find this common thread. They all suffered intensely, and they all owned that suffering completely. They refused to be victims even when victimized. They declined the identity of survivor, reaching instead for the mantle of conqueror. And not just conqueror of external circumstances, but of the internal battlefield where true strength is born. Now consider your own pain points. The fresh wounds still bleeding, the older scars that still twinge, the ancient injuries you've almost forgotten about. Each represents unclaimed power, if you've never fully owned them. Each contains strength waiting to be extracted. Each offers resources that belong to you but remain uncollected as long as you view pain as your enemy rather than raw material for your evolution. The process isn't comfortable. Ownership never is. It requires looking at aspects of yourself you've kept hidden, admitting vulnerabilities you've worked hard to deny, facing fears you've skillfully avoided. There will be resistance from within. The part of you comfortable with remaining a victim will fight desperately against your efforts to claim ownership. This inner war is normal, expected, the necessary prelude to transformation. Society offers little support for this journey. Modern culture worships comfort and demonizes discomfort. It sells endless pain relief but little pain integration. It offers sympathy for suffering but rarely guidance for transmuting suffering into strength. You won't be celebrated for claiming ownership of your pain. You won't receive parades or prizes. The rewards come in the form of internal resources that others can't see but you can feel. Power that doesn't need external validation because its reality is self-evident in how you move through the world. The most dangerous pain is the kind you think you've dealt with but have merely buried. The hurt you've convinced yourself is healed when it's simply hidden. This unowned suffering leaks into everything. It influences decisions below the level of consciousness. It sabotages relationships through unconscious patterns. It limits opportunities through invisible boundaries. Excavating this buried pain takes tremendous courage but yields equally tremendous power. You might be wondering about forgiveness, its role in this process. Here's the truth. Forgiveness is not a requirement for ownership. You can fully claim your pain and extract its power without pardoning its source. However, forgiveness often occurs naturally during the ownership process, not as an act of charity toward those who hurt you, but as an act of liberation for yourself. You realize that maintaining grudges costs energy better spent elsewhere. That hatred, however justified, occupies mental real estate you could use for growth instead. There's a paradox at the heart of pain ownership that few understand, but all must eventually confront. The moment you fully claim your suffering is often the moment it begins to lose its grip on you. Not because you've escaped it, but because you've absorbed what it came to teach. Like a strict but effective teacher, pain's purpose is complete once the lesson is learned. It may leave echoes, but the intense presence dissolves when its job is finished. This explains why some men seem to move through devastating losses with a grace that seems almost supernatural. They're not immune to pain. They're not callous or unfeeling. They've simply mastered the ownership process to such a degree that the transformation from suffering to strength happens rapidly, sometimes almost simultaneously with the hurt itself. What takes others years to process, they metabolize in moments because they've developed the internal machinery to claim pain instantly. You can develop this machinery too. It begins with small hurts, the minor setbacks and everyday disappointments that most people reflexively avoid or complain about. Instead of following those common paths, practice immediate ownership. Ask what value this small pain contains. Extract it deliberately. Integrate it consciously. These smaller repetitions build the capacity for handling the greater challenges when they arrive. Like a muscle developed through consistent training, your ability to transform suffering grows stronger with deliberate use. The ultimate test comes with the pains you didn't choose and couldn't avoid. The ambushes of fate that struck without warning or fairness. The losses that felt like theft. The betrayals that seemed to come from nowhere. These moments reveal whether your ownership capacity is theoretical or practical. Whether you can apply in crisis what you've practiced in calm. The men who pass this test aren't superhuman. They're simply prepared through consistent ownership of lesser pains for the claiming of greater ones. Here's a truth few will tell you. Pain claimed becomes not just strength, but clarity. Owned suffering burns away the non-essential. It reveals with merciless precision what matters and what doesn't. Men who have transformed their greatest hurts often possess a focus that others find almost frightening. They waste no time on trivialities. They cut through social games with uncomfortable directness. They measure everything against the wisdom their pain has purchased. This clarity becomes its own form of power, allowing them to see opportunities and threats that others miss entirely. Another hidden benefit. Pain fully owned becomes a bridge to genuine connection with others. Not the shallow bonding of shared complaints, but the profound recognition between those who have transformed their suffering rather than being defined by it. These connections run deeper than circumstance or convenience. They're based on mutual recognition of the ownership process and respect for anyone with the courage to complete it. In a world of victims seeking validation, those who transmute pain into power recognize each other instantly. The ownership of pain also transforms your relationship with future suffering. What once seemed a disaster to be avoided at all costs becomes a challenging but familiar process to be navigated with hard-earned skill. You stop fearing what hurt might do to you and start planning what you'll do with it. This shift alone changes your entire existence. The energy previously spent on anxiety becomes available for growth. The boundaries created by fear dissolve in the face of confidence in your transformative abilities. Consider how rare this capacity makes you in today's world. Look around at how many remain trapped in victimhood. Notice how many drag their unprocessed pain through decades, allowing old hurts to determine their limitations. Observe how many use suffering as an excuse rather than a resource. Then recognize the extraordinary advantage that pain ownership provides. Not just in terms of personal strength, but in terms of comparative capability in every arena of life. The final secret of pain transformation is perhaps the most profound. Once mastered, you may find yourself strangely grateful for your greatest sufferings, not in a masochistic sense of enjoying the hurt, but in the clear recognition of how essential that specific pain was to forging the man you've become. The challenges that once seemed like cosmic cruelty reveal themselves as necessary catalysts for your evolution. What you would have eliminated from your story, if given the chance, has become the chapter you wouldn't trade for anything. This gratitude marks the completion of the ownership process. It signals that you've extracted every ounce of value from what once was only injury. The pain hasn't disappeared from memory, but it has been so thoroughly transformed that its original negative charge has been neutralized and repurposed. What entered as poison has become medicine. What arrived as a weapon against you has become a weapon in your hand. So here stands the central truth again, now illuminated from all angles. Pain only becomes strength when you claim ownership of it, not when you endure it passively, not when you avoid it desperately, not when you numb it temporarily, not when you showcase it proudly, not when you discuss it endlessly, only when you own it completely, when you extract its resources deliberately, when you integrate its lessons permanently. This is the alchemy that turns lead into gold, the process that transforms wounds into wisdom, the system that converts suffering into strength. Not through mystical intervention, but through the deliberate application of will to what most men handle only with weak resignation or weaker evasion. You've carried pain. We all have. The question isn't whether you've suffered, but what you've done with that suffering. Whether you've remained its victim or become its master. Whether you've let it define your limitations or fuel your growth. Whether you've carried it as a burden or wielded it as a weapon. The choice has always been yours. The ownership has always been available. The transformation has always been possible. Perhaps until now the process was unclear, the path uncertain, but that excuse no longer remains. You know the truth. You understand the method. You see the potential. What happens next is entirely yours to decide. Will you continue treating pain as something that happens to you? Or will you begin treating it as raw material entrusted to you? Will you remain at the mercy of suffering? Or will you make suffering itself serve your evolution? The strongest men in history made their choice. Now it's your turn to make yours. Own your pain. Transform your suffering. Claim your power. This is how ordinary men become extraordinary. This is how victims become victors. This is how suffering becomes strength. Through ownership, complete, deliberate, transformative. The pain is waiting. The potential is there. The process is clear. The only question that remains is, will you begin?